Hey, it's me, Verge, coming at you from the Shoshone River here in Cody, Wyoming, and coming at you post an emergency room visit. I just wanted to share this story with you because it was very intense, and I think it's just, I feel it's a real story and also an example of how sometimes life is hard, and just being able to be honest with our feelings through that, and then also go through with whatever's going on. So about 2 weeks ago, Peter and Roslyn killed a juvenile raccoon, and I tried to save it, and my trying to save it backfired, and they ended up killing it. And after that, I went through a lot of very difficult feelings about death and what I have control over and what I don't have control over, and having 2 dogs that were bred and evolved for hunting, which I always tell people I don't hunt with them, but they're always hunting. However, they don't usually kill things, but lately they have been going on a bit of a killing spree. I'm watching Roslyn right now because she's kind of not doing well in the river. The river is actually pretty strong. I might have to go help her. Roslyn, come on. Come on. Come on. Can you get out of there? Come on. Can you get out? Come on, baby. Come on. Come on, baby. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. Come on, Rosemary. Come on. Come on. Come on. Come on. Come on. Come on, Rosemary. Come on. Good girl. Good girl. All right, thank you everyone for that support, because she was kind of caught in the current there. Good girl. The river is really high, and the current's pretty strong. So yeah, and then I realized, well, death has occurred with that raccoon, and I am going to take it as an offering, as I always do, and do something special with it that's meaningful for me. And something meaningful for me in the past year, as I have shown in some of the videos, Dragonfly, in some of my videos about having ceremonies for lost animal friends, is honoring death and getting to know life through death. And I have had so many sacred experiences with so many animals that I have found in death and that have come to me in death. And I've collected feathers and wings and talons, and even found a hide that had already been skinned of a fox on the road. And that was my first time ever stretching and salting a hide. And just realizing that these are beautiful gifts, and that I feel like the best way that I can honor these animals in their life is by caring about their death and taking moments to honor them, and perhaps keeping like holy and sacred talismans from them. You know, these bodies of animals, which ironically with wild animals I can sometimes get to know more in death, because I wouldn't be able to pick up a wild cat that was alive. I wouldn't be able, which I found one in Missouri, I wouldn't be able to pick up a hawk that was alive. I wouldn't be able to pick up a raccoon that was alive, or a fox, unless they were domesticated, or, you know, in certain situations. I think you see my point. And so it's been a really sacred way of connecting with these animals. And something that's become important to me is wanting to preserve and keep parts of these animals with me, or give them as gifts, or offer them in altars that I create in nature or where I'm living. And so I thought, okay, instead of being distressed about this raccoon, I'm going to have this be the first animal that I learned how to skin myself, and be there in that very intense situation with this raccoon. So I put the raccoon in a juniper tree high up overnight, and this juvenile raccoon 2 weeks ago that Peter and Roslyn killed, that I witnessed the killing of. And I went back the next day with a knife that turned out to not be very sharp. I brought Peter and Roslyn with me, and another one of the ranch dogs, and I skinned the raccoon, actually down by my stallion and best friend Rawhide, who passed away last year of colic, right around the time my family was moving out of my childhood home. His grave is down by Beaver Creek on our ranch, along with another old horse of mine, Rojo. And I went down near there and around a bunch of cows, and I skinned the raccoon. And it was truly one of the most intimate, beautiful experiences I've ever had. I've never skinned an animal, not by myself, and the only guidance I had been given by my dad was just, you know, make a slit up the belly and kind of go from there. And it is kind of self-explanatory. It's so interesting. It's like taking off a garment. It was like taking off a magical cloak that this raccoon had been wearing, and then it's just this body of flesh that looks so much like an embryo. So it was very, very intimate. Like I really got to know Raccoon, you know, inside and out. And it actually wasn't bloody or messy. I don't know if that was just because it was the next day, or if I think though it's because the blood doesn't get bloody necessarily between the skin and the muscle, that the blood is like inside. I'm not sure about that. It was just very interesting. It wasn't messy. It was sacred. It was intimate. It was very meaningful. And the dogs were with me there. The cows were very curious about what I was doing. When I went to recollect the raccoon, there was a red-tailed hawk that keened and screamed and circled in the air. And so it was very special. And I ended up I dunked the skin, the hide of raccoon in Beaver Creek 3 times, baptizing the skin, and I placed the embryo-like naked body of raccoon after the skinning, and blessed him on Rawhide's gravestone, and then put him under a special, very witchy, magical willow tree that's there, or it's almost like a willow bush. And so I had this very intimate experience with raccoon, and have felt like raccoon is part of my totem, to use that word, if I may. And perhaps it's disrespectful too. In my understanding, it's the spirit of an animal that is part of my strength and part of my being and with me, and that I am with. And so I had those experiences with raccoon. And then last night, I was having a very difficult night, just family stuff, and really difficult, like having very depressive, honestly, I would almost say suicidal thoughts, which is not something that happens to me very often at all. And I was just not in a good place. I was in a painful place. I was being with it. I was processing it. I was out walking around barefoot, just processing and being with the pain and trying to be there for my inner child during this, like that even if I don't feel seen or heard or loved, I can do that for myself. I can be the adult who's here to love that injured inner child. And I was sitting down by a juniper tree and just being with all these thoughts, observing them, noticing the feelings in my body, noticing the bodily sensations, a lot of it being in my right chest, that came up with each emotion. A lot of this was sadness and some anger and a lot of tears. And then I hear Raza barking. And I know she's on something. And Peter goes after her. And that's when it gets bad, when it's the two of them. And then the border collie from the ranch that was there goes after them as well. And so I'm just sitting there like in a very not good place and spiraling of like, great, now something else is gonna die. Like, is that my fault? Or is this just the cycle of life? And is hubris of me to even think that I have any place in this? I mean, they are my dogs, but what does that even mean? Like, how can I even, possess other life? I'm a caretaker, I'm a steward, like just in this existential crisis essentially. And my body almost got itself up and walked over there barefoot. And I walk around barefoot a lot, by the way. It's really a lifestyle, and it's really how I live my life. Rosa, maybe? There you are. And they really want to be here for this. Okay. And so usually it's fine because I'm very practiced at it, and I go on surfaces where I'm mindful, but this was an emergency situation. So I get down there and I see that all 3 dogs have this raccoon backed up against an overhang ledge down by the canal, which in the canal was also where they found the juvenile raccoon. Well, this is no juvenile raccoon. This is a huge raccoon. And, I don't know, about the size of Raza almost, honestly. And so I just act right away. They're not attacking it. They're just all 3 sitting there barking at it, having it backed up against this ledge. And as soon as I go down there and try and scatter them, they try and attack the raccoon. I get down there. It hadn't even occurred to me that the raccoon would attack me, honestly. I was just way too concerned with trying to save the raccoon myself. And so there's some paddle boarders out here on the river. And so I accidentally get between the raccoon and the tree, and the dogs are still barking. The raccoon is very much in both like fight and flight. And I'm trying to diffuse the situation, and before I know it, the raccoon has lunged at me. And quicker than you can imagine, the raccoon had bit me. So it's here, a puncture wound. He didn't scratch me. He didn't hold on or anything like that. It was just a quick bite and then escaped. And then Peter got the raccoon in his mouth again. And I was able to get Peter off, and the raccoon was able to get up a Russian olive tree. And sometime in this whole escapade, I got something in my foot that really, really hurt, my right foot. And so essentially I limp back to my parents' house. I get Peter to come with me, but Rosalind goes back and is barking at the raccoon in the tree. But I thought he was high enough up that she couldn't get to him, and I knew she wouldn't do any damage, or couldn't really, without a raccoon, without another fellow dog helping her. And by the way, coon hunting is a thing, raccoon hunting, which I didn't really know or understand. That's what I've heard it called. I don't actually like to use that word, so call it raccoon hunting. And people do it, and people do it with dogs, and raccoons can actually kill dogs. And so just putting that in there for context, there's a long storied history of raccoon hunting. And I also just want to mention, side note, just thinking about this, because you think of hats with a raccoon tail, from the sweet juvenile raccoon that I skinned and had that really beautiful learning, just love and life and death and all the things experience with, I did stretch that hide and salted it. So I will have that hide as a sacred connection between raccoon and I. That's the way that I think of it. And now I have a raccoon bite as another sacred interaction between raccoon and I. So basically, my dad, the raccoon was not rabid. He had been scared and attacked by my dogs, and he was not trying to attack them. He was trying to defend himself, and I think that he only bit me to try and defend himself, and was just very confused. And it was a bite and then run up a tree situation. It was not like a rabid raccoon situation. There's another boat coming down the river, so I'm gonna finish. Well, no, I'll just walk somewhere else. So basically, my dad, we had this discussion where it was well, the raccoon didn't have rabies, so I probably don't need to go get the rabies vaccine. We just didn't really come to a consensus on it, but I really didn't want to go get a vaccine and go to the hospital and do all these things. My parents, who are both former physicians, cleaned the area of the wound and sterilized it, and then put antibiotic ointment on the puncture wounds. So, and then put a big bandage over it. And then, So I go to sleep with it. Honestly, my foot, having whatever stuck in my foot, hurts worse than the raccoon bite. And wake up, and essentially everyone's worried. Other doctors in my family have been mobilized, and everyone has realized, like, actually I need to go get the rabies vaccine. And I just felt so angry. Like, I think I just saw a bald eagle fly up overhead. Cool. I felt so angry. I felt like, I think the main anger and sadness was just around feeling misunderstood. Like, I'd gotten lectured by my parents about why I shouldn't go around barefoot. And they just don't really understand how often I do that, the places I have been, and that it's a lifestyle for me. And, I feel like most people that encounter raccoons or were bit by one, it probably would be a rabid situation. Because, in most situations, if you're going to get bit by a raccoon, especially in more of a city setting, like, it's probably rabid. In this case, it was me out doing what I do, wandering around with my dogs, and my dogs getting on a raccoon, and me trying to save the raccoon's life and keep my dogs from getting hurt. And I just knew this raccoon didn't have rabies. Apparently they can carry it and not show symptoms, and, it could have had rabies and not been showing it. The encounter was not related to rabies. Like, it wasn't a raccoon coming and finding me out kind of thing. Well, so basically I ended up going to the ER, and I ended up having a very, very positive experience with a new young female ER doctor there, who I was able to just express my emotions and say how uncomfortable I was being there and how much I didn't want to be there, and have her really receive that and really hold space for me. And then I also found out that if people do get rabies, it's usually, according to her, 100% fatal. So it was like, well, I'm not really sure that that's a risk that's okay to take. Also, luckily, I do have health insurance, and it was covered by health insurance. And because otherwise it's very expensive, rabies vaccine. Like, if someone went in and didn't have health insurance, it can cost up to $900. And some countries actually suggest that you get a rabies vaccine to enter them, which I found interesting. And then I also found out that it's suggested that people who explore caves a lot, which I like to do, get a rabies vaccine. So basically my takeaway is that even though it felt in some ways inauthentic for me to go enter what I kind of consider the sterilized world of Western medicine and get this vaccine, I was able throughout the experience to remain authentic and to share with myself in my writing and my recording and my talking to myself, as well as with trusted others, like how I felt during this whole experience, how uncomfortable it was for me, how much I didn't want to be there, and yet how much I also saw that it was probably the responsible thing to do, not just for me, but for all, the animals I care for, the people who love me. And how interesting that it was during this very depressive spiral that I ended up getting bit by a raccoon and then being put in this situation where I kind of had to decide whether I would take a risk and not get a rabies vaccine, which would have essentially possibly ended in death. Possibly not. It's likely the raccoon didn't have rabies. But again, I'm not fully sure. There are a lot of mosquitoes here. I'm not fully sure that they can't still carry it even if they don't have it. I don't know. I don't know enough about rabies. And that was another thing just to realize, though, and be cognizant of, was with how emotional I was about it. It was hard to think clearly. And yet it was really important for me to be honest about how I was feeling through all of this. And I was. And I did something I didn't want to do, and it was hard. And in the end, I'm very glad I did it. I'm very privileged to have had access to that and to have health insurance to have been able to do that. And to have people in my life who honestly were willing to tell me that I was making a poor choice and give me other advice and suggest other things, even when I was really resistant to it. And it was just interesting too to note my resistance, how resistant I was to this. to going to the hospital and being subjected to all these needles. So in the end, I got 2 rabies immunoglobulin shots, or is it globin? Immunoglobulin, from a wonderful nurse and ER doctor, both women. And those shots were right in the wound. So that, like, in the puncture wounds, in the bite marks. So that was really, actually quite painful. And then I got a rabies vaccine in my left arm, and then a tetanus shot, because it's been 10 years since I've had one of those, in my right arm. So yeah, I got pretty shot up, if you will. And now I have to go get 3 more rabies vaccines over the next 2 weeks, because it's a series of them. So I felt like this was a story worth sharing. Takeaways for me, it was a very humbling experience of realizing that me trying to prove something was not worth putting my life in danger. It was also a very empowering experience of realizing that even as I go forth and do the thing that maybe I don't want to do, and in some ways conflicts with some of my values and lifestyle choices, I can still be honest about how I feel all the way through and express that and be with that and do somatic experiencing, which is noting the physical sensations connected with emotions that come up in my body, and be there for my inner child, and like not hate on myself for that, you know, not call myself stupid for not wanting to get the vaccines or go to the emergency room and do all of that. By the way, I had to go to the emergency room because it's a Saturday, so the urgent cares were all closed, but also a lot of the urgent cares don't have this, the immunoglobulins and vaccine. So I might have had to go to the emergency room anyway. Here's a little bit of blood from on my shirt from the shirt I was wearing around my waist. That's from when she was giving the shots in the wounds. It was so gnarly. It was so gnarly. So yeah, just like even though I knew in the end what needed to happen, and I don't think that once people told me I needed to do this, like physicians in my family, and were really worried, I wasn't not going to do it, because I just felt like that was not fair to people I loved, and even probably to myself. So realizing that I can do the appropriate, most responsible, reasonable, life-saving possibly thing, while also not delegitimizing the struggle that I was having around it, and not delegitimizing my feelings and my values and my beliefs and my preferences. Like being there with those, and the struggle that happened with sort of the incoherence of doing something that I really didn't feel like I wanted to do. And I felt like that was really powerful. Like that we can remain true to ourselves and sometimes do the thing that maybe for the greater good needs to be done that we don't want to do. Also, I used to be really, really afraid of needles, and it was cool to just be very embodied and practice breathing and be with the pain and with that sensation in a way I've never really experienced. And yes, Peter and Rosalind both are up to date on their rabies vaccines, which I'm very thankful for. All of the issues I had with them, having to take them to the vet when I was living in Arizona for foxtail abscesses on Rosalind's part, and they both had ear infections. And because of that, though, I ended up getting both of their vaccines completely up to date, and you can see how that worked out now. So I'm thankful for that. Yeah, that's the story of me and the raccoons for now. I have no doubt that Raccoon is going to keep showing up in my life, to be honest, because I think that we have a connection. And I will show you one day the skin, the hide, the beautiful, beautiful raccoon hide of the young juvenile raccoon who I couldn't save from Peter and Rosalind, and who taught me how to take the offering of skin from an animal that has already been lost in life to us, and just created a really sacred, precious connection with the skin of raccoon, and now with the teeth. They're sharp. Raccoons they can be big animals, and I'm not sure if they're part of the canine family. If anyone knows, please, I'm gonna go look it up, but please comment. Yeah, they definitely hold their own. And they've been, like I said, they've been known to kill dogs, and apparently will often drown dogs if they can get on top of their head in water. So I'm thankful that Peter and Rosalind are okay too, and the little border collie that was with us. Thank you for being here for this journey. I'd love to hear any stories that you have of times that you ended up having to do something that was different than your values. And if it helps to think about this idea of like, we can still support and be with our values and our concerns and our preferences and not delegitimize them, even if in the end we're going to have to end up taking a different action than maybe what we would most want. So much love to you. I'll show you a little bit more of the Shoshone. This is the river I grew up on. I'm back in my hometown right now. There's Rosalind. I don't know what they're sniffing up down here. Much love. Talk to you soon.